Well, greetings, brethren. Happy Sabbath to all of you. Maybe we'll do the sermonette like that. We could start in Genesis 1, then we'll go to Genesis 2, Genesis 3. Now we're going to jump around a little bit. That's okay. I was going to cover a passage that I'm going to have us turn to now. And you can look at that's in Luke 22 if you'll turn over there. But I won't actually be able to tackle the substance of it until we clear up what has been pointed to in the past as a contradiction in the Bible. Now, you think something's going to be simple to present something for a sermonette, and then you start looking and think, wait, there's a little bit of involvement here we're going to have to go through. So let's see what it says. I'd like you to look here at Luke 22. And we'll read in verses 35 through 38. And actually the issue isn't directly here, although part of it is. But it's verse 35 says, "And he, Jesus, said to them," this is that final Passover, by the way, with his disciples, that last night with them. "And he said to them, when I sent you without money bag, knapsack, and sandals, did you lack anything? So they said, nothing. And then he said to them, but now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors, for the things concerning me have an end. And so they said, look, Lord, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it's enough." So there's some interesting issues here with prophecy and the need for swords. But we're going to look today more at this issue of what Jesus had told them when he sent them out before. Notice again in verse 35, "And he said to them, when I sent you without money bag, knapsack, and sandals, did you lack anything?" And they said no. Now let's see more about what he was referring to. We'll turn to 3 other passages. And it'd be good if you could place a marker in each of those, as we're going to go through them a couple of times. I don't know how easy that is for you to do, but we are going to turn to 3 different places here in the Gospels to see what he's talking about here. The first is over in Matthew chapter 10. We will not be coming back here to Luke 22, but we'll be in Matthew 10 and Mark 6 and Luke 9. But in Matthew 10, I'll look over there. This is the account of where Jesus was sending out the 12 to go preach around apart from him. They were going to go off and do some preaching themselves. And this is in Matthew 10, verses 9 through 10. It says here in the New King James, "Provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staffs," literally it just says nor a staff, nor staff, "for a worker is worthy of his food." And then he goes on to say, you're going to go to these places, and the people there that you're preaching to basically are going to take you in. And if they don't, then you're going to reject them, but basically the people that you're preaching to are going to take care of you. So they don't need to take all of this stuff. Look over in Mark chapter 6 now, verses 8 and 9. Mark 6, we see it here. It says, "He commanded them to take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bag, no bread, no copper in their money belts, but to wear sandals, and to not put on 2 tunics." So actually that seems rather different. Because in the first place, in the other verse, in Matthew 10, he had said, no gold or silver, nor bag, nor tunics, nor sandals, nor staff. But here he says, except the staff. Then we come over to Luke 9, verse 3, and again, these are all accounts of sending out the 12. Luke 9, verse 3, It says, and he said to them, take nothing for the journey, neither staffs, or staff, actually singular is what it actually is, nor bread, nor bag, nor bread, nor money, and do not have 2 tunics apiece. And interestingly, we'll look at another verse here in the next chapter, in Luke 10, verse 4. This time is where he's sending out the 70 others to preach. So he sent out the 12, but in the next chapter, only Luke mentions this about the sending out of the 70. Some versions have 72, but the 70. In verse 4, it says, carry neither money bag, knapsack, nor sandals along the road. Well, it didn't mean they weren't to say hello, but it's talking about these elaborate, drawn-out Middle Eastern greetings that would really slow them down. That's not the issue here, though. What I want to draw attention to is that Matthew and Luke seem to agree that the disciples were not supposed to take a staff or sandals. If you compare with the instruction to the 70 and what Jesus said to the 12 on the final Passover with them. He said, when I sent you without sandals and without money bag and all this. So what's going on with Mark, though? Here Jesus says to take nothing except the staff and to wear sandals. Actually said that in Mark. There's what's called the Skeptic's Annotated Bible, where they try to pick apart the Bible, by Steve Wells. And he says this about this. He says, in Matthew's gospel, Jesus tells his disciples to go barefoot and take no staff. But the Jesus in Mark's gospel tells them to wear sandals and carry a staff. So you're picking that apart. A number of Bible apologists have actually labeled this one of the most difficult alleged Bible contradictions that they have encountered. So, brethren, how do we solve this apparent contradiction? Were the disciples Jesus sent to preach to have a staff or not? Were they to have sandals or not? So I've titled this, Supplies, Part 1. Staff and sandals or not? Supplies, Part 1, staff and sandals or not? Well, first of all, the idea that Jesus sent them out barefoot does not seem reasonable. Okay, so I'll just say that it just does not seem reasonable that he would send them out barefoot. Do you think Jesus sent them out barefoot? We have no indication otherwise that this was a thing the disciples were to do. Isaiah walked around naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and wonder, and maybe had some coverings on, we don't know exactly, but that was a special case. David went head covered and barefoot up the Mount of Olives as he wept over fleeing Jerusalem because of Absalom's rebellion, but again, it's very unusual. I don't think Jesus was telling his disciples to walk around without shoes. And in that day, the shoes they would have been wearing were sandals. So right off the bat, don't take sandals seems to me to mean besides the sandals they were wearing. Well, why would you do that anyway? Because the sandals they had then wore out and broke. And if they were packing, they might take an extra pair. But they weren't to be packing, clearly. That's clearly the case. They weren't to take a bag and a knapsack and all this, it says. So that's first of all, I don't think they were barefoot. But second is the issue of the meaning of the key verbs here. The issue of the meanings of the key verbs here. I want to look at these verses again briefly. And first of all, let's note the ones in Matthew and Mark. In Matthew 10, if you look back over there, sorry I didn't remind you to hold a place there, but in Matthew 10, 9 through 10, it says, provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts nor bag for your journey. But that word provide is actually in the Greek katesthe, and that's spelled K-T-E-S-T-H-E, katesthe, but it's from that's a form of the word katomai, which is K-T-O-M-A-I, And that word actually means to get or to acquire. The NASB renders it to acquire. So what it really is saying here is acquire neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey, nor two tunics, nor sandals, nor staff, for a worker is worthy of his hire. That last part is because when he goes to those people he's preaching to, you're going to be working among them and they're going to be providing for you. This is kind of something that happens with the church today, that the ministry is provided for out of the means of the recipients of the messages. But acquire, don't acquire it, And then it's a little bit different in Mark, because if you look over at Mark 6, 8 through 9, where it says, he commanded them to take nothing for the journey except the staff. The word for take is the Greek word airo, A-I-R-O, airo, take nothing for the journey. And that really has here the sense of just to take it with them, to take something with them. So here he says, don't take anything with you except the staff. So clearly we can see here there's a difference in the words that are used. In Matthew, Jesus is evidently saying, don't go and get any of these things in preparation for your travel. And in Mark, he would seem to be saying, don't take stuff with you beyond what you already have on hand. So both would be saying basically the same thing. Don't carry extra sandals. Don't go get another staff. They were ready to go, as it were. His disciples had already been following him around. They were already on the go. They'd be away from him now, but they would still have what they needed, because God would provide their needs as they went through the people they were preaching to, who would take them in and look after them, as he continues on in these accounts to say. Now, many commentators will leave it there, but there's a problem still between Mark and Luke. And really, this is what makes the matter a good deal more difficult. I'd like you to look over here at Luke 9, because in Luke 9:3, it says, and he said to them, take nothing for the journey, neither staff, nor bag, nor bread, nor money. The word here for take is airo, again, the same as in Mark, where Mark said, take nothing except for a staff. But here it says, don't take a staff. So, and it's using the same Greek word, airo. So that throws a loop, for a little bit of a loop there. So what do we do with this? Well, third, this brings us to the matter of individual stylized usage of biblical authors. Individual stylized usage of biblical authors. The following is from an article at Apologetics Press by Eric Lyons, titled, Take It or Leave It. It says this: Luke did not use katalmi, or its form kateste, that's the word for acquire in Matthew, in his account. Luke didn't use that account because he nearly always used katalmi in a different sense than Matthew did. In Matthew's account, the word katalmi is used to mean provide or acquire, like we saw, whereas in the books of Luke and Acts, Luke used this word to mean purchase, buy, or earn. Luke always used as acquire means in a monetary sense, and it gives a whole lot of examples of this where he's doing that. Now it says, when Luke, the beloved physician, used the word katalmi, he meant something different than when Matthew, the tax collector, used the same word. Whereas Luke used the word to refer to purchasing or buying something, Matthew used, whenever Matthew was talking about purchasing, he would use a different Greek word. And that Greek word is agorazo. And I'm not going to spell all these, but it's a different word whenever he would talk about purchasing, which Luke didn't use. Luke used this word for acquire, for buying things. So they're using a little bit different language in the way that they're talking about things. As such, it would make no sense for Luke to use katalmi in the sense of, the way he normally did. He wouldn't use that word katalmi because he'd use it for buy. And he wouldn't quote Jesus as saying, buy no money. because that was part of the thing there. That didn't even make sense. So he is going to use a different word, a more general term for acquire, and that word is airo. Okay, but just as katomai did not mean the same for Luke and Matthew, the Greek word airo, which is translated take in both both Mark and Luke, they did not mean the same for those two writers. Because Mark consistently used airo in other passages throughout his gospel to mean simply take or pick up and carry. And there's a number of examples of that. Luke didn't use that word for pick up and carry. He used a different word. He used the word for pick up and carry is a word bastazo. And in fact, it's in Luke 10, where it says in Luke 10:4, we read this a while ago, carry neither money bag, he told the 70, carry is bastazo. So when he would use the word, pick up and take, he uses this word bastazo. He used it also in the case of take up your cross, when Jesus said that, bastazo, lift up, take up, carry it. So he wouldn't generally use that word airo for simply pick up and carry it. He meant it more generally. Mark was evidently talking specifically about picking something up and taking it with you. And so he would use that word there, airo. To reiterate, Luke would not use the word Matthew used for acquire or get, because he used that word specifically to mean purchase, and he knew Jesus meant more than just that. He substituted with the word that he used more generally for acquire or get, the same word that Mark used for pick up and carry, and Luke used a different word for pick up and carry. Slightly complicated maybe, but when we recognize this, there is no contradiction at all. Matthew and Luke are presenting Jesus as saying to not go out and acquire these various things for the journey, and Mark is presenting Jesus as saying to take no more on the journey than what they had. The shoes on their feet and the staff they already had. They didn't go barefoot, and they didn't need to drop their staff if they had one. They did need to get moving and to travel light with their needs provided for on the go. This shows why in understanding the context and language it's important to discern the biblical author's particular usage. Now, one more thought on this. Why would this apparent discrepancy arise? I was thinking about why this wording of the instruction given might be different between the gospel accounts, why Mark specifies they could have a staff with them. Putting this all together, we see that this must mean a different one from what they already had, a different staff. But why does the except for a staff even come up in Mark? Maybe Jesus said this a couple different ways, and maybe he said it differently to different people to clarify. Perhaps they didn't all have staffs. Maybe Matthew didn't have a staff, so it wasn't an issue to him at the time. But perhaps Peter did. Tradition says Peter gave his account of things to Mark to write down. So perhaps Peter had a staff and thought Jesus was telling him not to bring it, and Jesus then or after clarified to him and others that it was okay to use what they already had in hand. So Peter's remembrance of what Jesus said would have been slightly different in emphasis from what Matthew wrote or what Luke later got from others. But it would not be a contradiction. It would just be a different perspective. And then, what do we take from this? Again, what do we have here in these Gospels? These are eyewitness accounts, brethren. That's the amazing thing. And they're not always going to be identical. Sometimes if it was exactly identical, the critics would say, well, the one just copied from the other. But then when it's different, any small difference that you can't explain, they're contradictory and they're not, they're just the product of men. So what are you going to have? What really proves the authenticity is these difficulties that show a difference in perspective, but with a little work, they can be harmonized. That's what we find constantly as we read through these accounts. And that's what we find here as well. And that's it for part one. In part two, which is a little less technical, we will tackle the issue of what Jesus was talking about when he said at his last Passover with the disciples to now take stuff with them, including swords. What's up with that? Stay tuned for that message.